Today's episode of the Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog. Bring speed and scale to your security organization. Datadog Cloud Security Platform delivers real-time threat detection and continuous configuration audits across applications, hosts, containers, and cloud infrastructure. Built on top of the observability platform, Datadog brings unprecedented integration between security and DevOps aligned to shared organizational goals. As a listener to the Cloudcast, you can sign up for a free 2-week trial to see for yourself how Datadog can elevate your cloud infrastructure security posture by visiting datadog.com/security-cloudcast. Sign up now and receive a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/security-cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it is Aaron for Cloud News this week. And it is 1 week until KubeCon. Lots of buzz around this, and lots of folks we know in the community making the trip over to Amsterdam for KubeCon. Certainly wish everyone safe travels. I won't be able to make it this time around, but Brian is. So if you are going to the event, certainly look Brian up. And I look forward to really watching everything virtually and really looking at the great announcements. And it's expected to be a very high turnout next week. So we're going to jump right into cloud news. First of all, Cloudcast alum Honeycomb gets $50 million in a D round. And so first of all, $50 million, I think that is a right-sized D round for the economy that we're in and the climate we're in right now, but their total funding is about $150 million, and it's good to see them continue their growth. Of course, they popularized the term observability, and 7 years old now. I mean, time flies. I can't believe that they are 7 years old, and we certainly wish everyone over at Honeycomb the best. And next up, we have not one, but two quick tidbits on AWS. First of all, AWS Supply Chain launches into general availability. We talked about this. It announced back at reInvent, and it was another one of their point solutions in the cloud. And this is an interesting direction that AWS is headed in, and it'll be interesting to see how these point solutions grow over time. So certainly general availability is there, and I look forward to some numbers in the future from them. And finally, another AWS bit. AWS launches a new accelerator program specifically for generative AI. Applications are going on any day now, and then kicks off in May and will go through July. The startups that participate can win up to $300,000 in free cloud services, as well as technical and business advice from Amazon. Of course, others have done this in the past. I know Google's done this, Microsoft's done this, and it's good to see AWS do this. And of course, generative AI certainly seems to be the hot button right now in the industry, getting probably 2, maybe 3 billion in investors in the last year in this market. So definitely a hot area for investments, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of these programs. So with that, I'm going to close out cloud news this week. And coming up right after the break, we're going to be talking about software bombs and supply chains.
Are you getting pressure from finance to justify or reduce your cloud bill? CloudZero is the only cloud cost platform loved by engineers and trusted by finance. CloudZero can identify unused, idle, or over-provisioned resources, alert you to spend anomalies, and organize 100% of your spend into a framework that mirrors your business structure, like cost per customer, product feature, or team. It's the most powerful platform ever built to provide accurate, granular visibility into your total cloud spend without the typical pitfalls of legacy cloud cost management tools like endless tagging or clunky Kubernetes support. Manage cost, optimize development, and maximize profit, all in one platform. Join companies like Rapid7, Drift, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. Visit today to experience immediate and ongoing savings on your cloud bill. And we're back. And folks, for those of you that have listened to the show for a little while or for a long time, you know that Aaron and I always have a real strong place in our hearts, and sort of the founding of the show has always been about highlighting new technology, highlighting really interesting new companies, and almost as importantly, highlighting founders and founding members of companies that we have a tremendous amount of respect for, and we find are out really changing the market and have been able to have big impacts on the technology market. And so today, really excited to get a chance to do that again today, getting a chance to do that with a longtime friend of the show. So really excited to have Rob Szumski, who is founder and CEO of Edgebit. Rob, welcome to the show. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here. This is my second time on the show.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Rob and I, Rob will talk about his background. Rob and I got to know each other for a number of years when I was at Red Hat in the OpenShift team. He was part of the core founding CoreOS team when we acquired them. I think it was in 2019. So we got a chance to work together for a number of years, but really excited to learn about what you're working on now, because you are now starting and founding a brand new company. So give folks a little bit of your background, and then obviously tell us, what got you excited about starting Edgebit.
Yeah, so I'm founder and CEO of Edgebit, and we're building a software supply chain security platform. And so we'll talk about that in a second. But my background is in kind of cloud infrastructure and containers. I worked at Rackspace long ago, if you can remember when Rackspace was the number 2 cloud. Azure didn't exist. GCP didn't exist, as crazy as that sounds. And then joined a company called CoreOS, where we invented a lot of early container technology. And our mission there was to, very broad, was to secure the internet, which I think we actually did by kind of reinventing how the operating system works that's underneath all of these distributed systems that we have today. So, the operating system underneath Kubernetes and all the popular cloud platforms all resemble this paradigm shift now. And we started that.
Yeah.
And I think the kind of way that I've arrived at starting this company with my co-founders is throughout that entire experience, we've seen that dependency sprawl is just out of control. One of my co-founders, Russell, ran security engineering at Okta previous to starting the company. And they've got tons of teams, tons of dependencies, lots of moving pieces, and just doing compliance and running a security program and doing vulnerability remediation is just really, really hard at scale. And the scale is just getting worse and worse every single day.
Yeah. I think back to when I first met, when Aaron and I first met, both Alex Polvey and Brandon, who had started CoreOS. This was, I think it was 2013. We were down at one of the LinuxCon events down in New Orleans, and these guys came up to us, and somebody introduced us, and they said, you should talk to these guys. They're inventing a new distribution of Linux. And I remember we sat there and we went, boy, it's 2013. Why in the world would somebody want to be in the Linux business? That feels like a market that's pretty well established, and kind of things that were sort of in place. And as I was thinking about wanting to talk to you about things, there was a part of me that was like, hey, building software and software dependencies have been around for a long time, but it feels like we're obviously we do things differently with containers. We're doing things differently as we're building microservices and building software faster. What about sort of now? Because software supply chain, software bill of materials is a big topic these days. What do you see as very different? And I guess ultimately, what's got you focused on trying to make this space much, much better? Versus sort of that moment we had with Linux where it's well, doesn't it already exist type of thing?
Yeah, I think the best example to start with is, yes, dependencies have existed forever and you've got ways of upgrading them, but look what happened with Log4j. Just anybody just asking their teams, are we using this and where are we using this? Sometimes with one team, you get an answer in 2 minutes, another team, 2 weeks, or we don't know. That's a huge problem and, still has not been fixed to this day. I think I saw something where the federal government spent 33,000 hours remediating Log4j and kind of downstream security problems.
Wow.
Just one event, absolutely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And so what's different about now is, before everyone was kind of just doing best effort, right? Some people sort of follow some NIST guidelines here. If you're under a compliance regime, it may be strong or not strong in certain areas. But the government kind of finally said, all right, we need to level this up here. We've got certified engineers that build skyscrapers and submarines and stuff like that. Doesn't exist on the software side. And so the federal guidelines are going to step in and do that. And so the Biden administration put out a cybersecurity directive, which kind of kicked off a lot of the focus in the supply chain space. And I think that's really powerful for like pushing industry to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's, when you combine two things, you take like the U.S. federal government, which is obviously one of the largest users of technology, buyers of technology, maybe not always necessarily influencers, but when you have the ability to set federal directive, something might become a law, that's super, super powerful. And then, you remember, and, this is me sort of slapping myself upside the head going, hey, dude, things are different. Like, take your Log4j example where you go, well, where is it? We no longer have, completely centralized technology groups. We no longer have centralized decision making, right? We look at, how many different groups have an AWS account, or how many groups just kind of work on their own. So, yeah, no, I think the fact that everything is super distributed now, is a really good impetus for figuring out, hey, we can't keep doing things the way we did them in the past. You've been around this space for quite a while now, as you mentioned, previously at CoreOS and now what you're doing at Edgebit. Walk us through, especially in this sort of new world, like a day in the life of the teams that are involved with the software supply chain. Like kind of what tools do they rely on today, and where does it feel like there's just big gaps that they need help with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really gaps all over the place, and it really comes down to like whether organizations are cloud native or not. And those, you can kind of put those in two groups. On the cloud native side, you're probably using containers. You've got strong automation via some pipelines. Those teams are probably doing more DevSecOps type stuff, where a smaller team is responsible for deploying and securing their own software that they run. But then on the other side, a lot of these orgs have more applications than they even employ engineers, at some of these larger banks and Fortune 500s. And so that means that you're not 100% on one application. You're switching hats, and you're context switching constantly there. And that means that like the security tools you're using might be really piecemeal compared to like some of those highly automated platforms where somebody's worried about, we do some vulnerability scanning, but it's kind of every once in a while we think about it, versus something that's very highly automated or doesn't exist at all. And really, there's no standardization for those tools. Like there are some Gartner categories. And what we've observed is that a lot of those tools are very siloed. So something that runs in a production kind of CI pipeline doesn't actually know if that software ever got deployed, the version that was scanned or looked through. And then the same thing is, something live in production. It's like, where did this thing come from? What is even in this thing? Nobody knows. And so this is where the supply chain problem starts. And there are some emerging standards for how to do this. Mostly a software bill of materials, an SBOM, is a piece of metadata that says what's in a piece of software. And this is actually what's driving, or the driving force between the federal guidelines. If you sell software to the government, you now need to provide one of these to prove that you understand what's in your software.
Yeah. What, for folks maybe that aren't as familiar with the concept of SBOM, so, if you're a software provider and you go, hey, this is the thing I'm going to ship, anybody who's worked on the product side of things, you sort of go, okay, we typically have a manifest or something that says like, hey, I could tell you what's in there. But if you are, what happens after you've sort of given it to somebody? Because oftentimes it gets modified, new things get added to it. Like how does the concept of SBOM work in a more dynamic world? Like how do we know what's been updated? Like you said, how do we keep track of inventory? What's been changed? What versions? How does this work in a more dynamic world?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's tricky, because if you think about it, you might pull in some open source libraries, and maybe they either do or don't have their own software bill of materials related to them. Mm-hmm. And so you either generate that and add it onto the pile that you already have, or you need to mix that in with some of your first party code that you still want to track in the same manner. And so now you've like kind of aggregated all this metadata together. And that's like kind of problem one, is doing that at scale. As you've got like a front end and a back end that make up an application, but your customer probably wants to understand that as one piece, right? It's two teams inside your organization, but they don't care about that. Yeah. So there's that piece of it. And then now that you understand what's in your software, all right, what are the vulnerabilities attached to these? What do we know about this? And so you can think of one step of enrichment is taking that inventory and saying, oh, this piece of code has 5 known vulnerabilities, and maybe you care about only if they're high and critical, or et cetera. You have an SLA that you want to fix those. Then the last piece is like, then how exploitable are those vulnerabilities? A lot of the times, a lot of this code is dormant. And so if it doesn't run as part of your product, but it is packaged in there, that's a good thing for your customers to know, because they don't have to worry about that. And so that whole set of problem, if you just think about that times every app and every team and every front end, every component, every microservice, becomes a huge surface area for just looking at this metadata, aggregating it, and understanding it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, as I think about it, if you were, and I hate to do this for people that are listening, but like if you drew a picture and you think about the typical sort of left to right of, here's the beginning of my pipeline, the end of it, let's just assume that's production for simplicity reasons. I mean, you could have totally different things at the beginning or the left side of the pipeline and the right. And then, like you said, you may have a piece of a package of code, which is a bunch of software. Some of it might be actually doing stuff, and others might just sort of be going along for the ride. Like it might not actually be active. And yeah, I can imagine having to sort through is this the original software we received? Is this the production software we received? How much is being used? How much of it could be turned on or become like, that's a massive sort of matrix puzzle of figuring out what to do with it. And so ultimately, so you guys fit into this equation, into this picture where, like how, as you're painting a picture for people, where does Edgebit fit into this bigger picture, and where are you guys trying to focus your energies and your technologies?
Yeah, so we kind of talked to 2 main stakeholders. It's like a central security function, and then developers and engineers that are actually writing code. And with the central security function, if you think about this, and this matches my co-founder Russell's experience at Okta perfectly, is they're not experts in, like, say your application, or you have 100 applications, right? They can't possibly understand the security content of those. And so they're just throwing tickets over the wall, or they're like, go investigate this. Does this matter to us? Do we run this code? And so solving that problem times like 100 or 1,000 engineers is just really tough and time consuming.
Right.
And so that roughly falls into the category of just vulnerability management. Are we at risk of this thing? Now that we understand it, how do we fix it? And did we actually fix it? We want to help security teams and developers have as frictionless as possible experience with that problem. And so for security teams, it means having a place to detect and actually figure out what's real, what's the prioritization of these threats, and then let's go get engineers to fix them. And then for developers, they hate change. They just want to stick inside of their pipeline and in their IDE. And so we want to be as close to that process as possible. And so what we do is we take context from production about how this code is actually running, like in the Linux kernel, and then give that context all the way back to the very beginning of that pipeline, shifting left as far as you can go, to the engineer when they're upgrading like a dependency. Hey, you're going from version 1 to version 2. That either fixes or introduces these problems. And this code actually is running in production right now. And so the change that you're making here is more weighty. It matters more than some other dormant piece of code. And so that's either, yes, check mark, you remediated this thing, let's get it live, or hey, you're about to introduce this critical vulnerability, let's not put that live, and then fix it.
Interesting. So I feel like in the past, as I've looked at this space a little bit, or maybe even before it was called software supply chain, there's always been lots of tools that would go look at your container registry or your repositories and go, okay, let me run some vulnerability scanning over there. I'll give you these huge reports with green, yellow, red stuff and various things. But people would get those big reports and they would go, okay, there's hundreds and hundreds of things on here. When will I find time to deal with them? But at that point, you still hadn't necessarily like prioritized them. Like you hadn't said like, this is in production or whatever. I feel like, from seeing the early kind of demos of what you guys have built, like you guys take a very different approach. It seems like you basically say like, hey, let's get in front of the stuff that is literally in production so that people are like, look, the business itself has decided this is important. This isn't just a laundry list for lists. This is like, it's important. It's running real applications. It's doing real transactions. And then you guys kind of use that as a lighthouse to prioritize things back to developers. Is that somewhat of the approach that you take, is like, let's get in front of the most important things that should be the most visible to people, as opposed to just becoming another set of tools that generate reports for generating reports' sake?
Right, exactly. It's a fire hose. And so there's like, you have a limited capacity of things that you're going to fix. And that's just a function of the time and engineers that you have. And so like, let's say you can only fix 10 items a week. You obviously want that to be the most impactful 10 items. And so that's what we try to get to your engineering team and for your security team to understand that. And, I've talked to folks that like some of these large enterprises are tracking 100,000 to 1,000,000 known vulnerabilities that they know of right now. Like you're never going to burn that backlog down. You just need to be ruthlessly prioritizing what you are going to fix. And the interesting thing about this, if you can imagine, like these supply chain regulations now are talking about you need to communicate that information to your customers and to other parties. It's not a good look when you've got 100,000 known vulnerabilities. But if you can prove that a vast majority of those, it's dormant code or we've got this remediation plan in place, it's a lot less scary to start sharing that information.
Yeah. I'm curious, you guys talk to both, like you said, developers and also security teams. In the past, those have been somewhat siloed. They had different priorities, different goals, and different metrics and so forth. What happens when you guys, I'm curious how the different conversations work. So you talk to the security team, you highlight for them, but you're really not highlighting them for them like everything. I mean, you give them an inventory, but you kind of go like, these are the most important things. Do you get pushback from them to go, yes, but as a security person, I have to think of all the possibilities. Therefore, I'm not only interested in this little piece of it. Like I need to look at the big picture. Or are they sort of like, ooh, this is a better way of thinking about it because it's tied to things that are directly, impacting the business, being used by the business. Like, do you find your guys' approach helps streamline the kind of the scope that security people have to worry about?
It does, but it's a little bit of a mental shift for folks that aren't used to thinking of this as like a constantly changing, like dynamic problem where like you're never going to be done with it. Like, and some of these, processes are now like manual spreadsheets and things like that. So it's a little bit like easier to track from like, this thing isn't live changing in front of me, but like the millisecond you hit save on one of these manual reports, it's out of date. Right. And so it's coming around to that line of thinking of, dormant code that has security problems in it is a problem and those should be fixed. But if you have live code with security problems in it, you should just fix those first. And if you have more of those than the dormant code, then you're probably never going to get to the dormant code, that like shift in thinking is just like, it's a never ending fire hose and you just need to start treating it the best that you can. And you can get ahead of it if you have the right tools and the right prioritization. It's just a mental shift for some folks. And then some folks are already living that life today and just need to, get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like if we go back to sort of the beginning of this conversation, like you guys, you're living on the machines, you've got a piece of software, a piece of technology living on the host running production machines. You've got awareness of what's going on in a pipeline. So you sort of check the box of, hey, are we running Log4j? Where is it? Right. So you can do the inventory things, but then you really take it a step further, which is like, okay, whether we have a problem or not, like let's still focus on the most important things, the most vulnerable things, knowing, like you said, that things are going to change and you're never going to get to the whole backlog. But at least if that Log4j thing were to pop up, it's like, okay, cool. I have the sensors out there keeping track of what's going on. I can give you stuff in real time. You can go figure out how to remediate those things.
Exactly. And one thing kind of that's more future looking is if you understand that a piece of code should remain dormant, there's a lot of tech that you can do to make sure it remains dormant. And we're really excited about pushing the boundaries there. And a good example of this is like if you've ever written any piece of software, typically something says it's dependent on like Perl for like processing some regexes in a certain way or something like that. And you're like, look, no one in this organization or on this team intends to use Perl, ever wants to use Perl, has ever written Perl code in this repository. Just prevent this from running. And then like all of the Perl related vulnerabilities just go away. Like it's impossible for them to matter. I think we can really push the boundaries on that. If you think about, getting towards a more immutable Linux, but inside of like a container, inside of an application, like this piece of tech, this function, like while it's bundled in this open source library, should never run. Let's just prevent it from running. That's like kind of the end result of where all this goes.
Interesting. No, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So, SBOM and secure supply chain are going to be big topics at KubeCon next week for anybody attending, and obviously lots of conversations that come after that. As you're looking at this space, what areas excite you, and where do you see it evolving, even just over the next 6 months or so? Like, what are some things that people ought to be paying attention to in this space that are going to start popping up in their Twitter feed and their headlines and other stuff?
I think there's always some standard work that's going to be happening, as well as the government regulations right now are pretty fuzzy kind of on purpose, but I think they're going to crisp up as they walk through each successive kind of agency. And so it's the executive branch is handing stuff down to the Office of Management and Budget, and then NIST gets involved, and then it's going to keep coming all the way down. What I'm excited about is it's just a matter of time before this makes it into SOC 2 and ISO compliance, more of the commercial security standards. And so then that's going to impact basically the entire software industry. Every SaaS is basically SOC 2 compliant. And so I think, keep your eyes peeled for that coming down. It's been kind of optional right now, as some of the NIST guidelines already cover this, and some folks just optionally implement some of that. So I'm excited about that. But if you think of where we are as an industry, think about the days of the internet and SaaS providers, but before everybody had a status page. We're kind of like that in the security realm. When Log4j comes out, or Heartbleed back in the day, it was who fixed and remediated Heartbleed or these things, and am I safe to start using that SaaS service again, or if I'm worried about my data security? Right now, there are no status pages for security. It just doesn't exist. There's no metadata. There's no way for you to make a correct assumption about something. And so that's what's going to start changing, is these SBOMs, as you communicate them and aggregate them and send them to your customers, people just have a better way to make a decision about something related to the security of something that they don't own anymore. And as you consume more and more SaaS, this becomes more and more critical.
Interesting. Yeah, the status page for security. Interesting. Because it's become the place people go to as soon as it's is AWS down? Is it slow? Is it that? Very, very cool. Last question. You guys are obviously, the company's still new, still growing, still evolving. If folks want to reach out to you, obviously you've been living in this space for quite a while. What's the best way to reach out to you and the team? And whether it's just, engaging around the technologies, or engaging around the things you guys are building in open source, what's the best way to get in touch with the team?
Edgebit.io, our website, is probably the best one. You can hit me up on Twitter as well at Rob Szumski. But yeah, we're just excited to chat with folks about these problems, whether they're really interested in kind of the real security work and supply chain security around artifact signing and verification and things like that, or the vulnerability fire hose that everybody's experiencing. We're just excited to chat with folks, and so we'd love for you to reach out.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, Rob. It's been good to have you back on. We haven't caught up in a while, so it's good to kind of see where things are going. Where things are going with Edgebit, and great to kind of get a little more in depth with this thing that everybody seems to be talking about quite a bit these days, whether it's SBOM or secure software supply chain. So thank you for the time. Thank you for educating us, and folks. Having known Rob for a while, I can't recommend getting in touch with him if this is a space you're interested enough. Knows this stuff really well, knows his technology really well, and has been at the forefront of a lot of really interesting kind of early stuff around this container space and cloud native space. So with that, I want to thank Rob for his time. On behalf of Aaron and I want to thank him for his time. Folks, as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for helping us grow the community, help us grow the show. And with that, I'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.